Every successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. Welcome to the John Schultz podcast. We're very excited to have Patti Grabel here on the podcast today. She has a cool, very unique, very fun story that we're all going to listen to today. She's an artist, writer, and producer based in New York City and Watermill, New York. As an artist, she works in a range of mediums, well known for her Lick the Spoon series, so we're excited to hear about that. Her installations have appeared in Bloomingdale's, the Museum of Arts and Design, Chase Edwards Contemporary Gallery, and I want to pronounce this right, Galleria Ciedoro. Pronounce that. Fedoro. I don't want to get that wrong. So thanks for helping me. Obviously, you've written tons of original content for reality shows that you've been working on. You're an active philanthropist supporting Feeding South Florida and City Harvest, which is terrific. That's such a great cause. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I feel so grateful to be here today.
It's going to be fun. No, I'm excited too.
Totally.
So, the podcast is about this myth of overnight success. And, that could be different times and different years that it happens for the guests that come on the show. I was going to name this show 30-Year Overnight Success, but what I found is that everyone can be basically working from when they're 5 years old, if they were an athlete, all the way to if they're 60, 70, 80 years old, if they started a new career or, got into something new. So that's the premise. And I like to start out by asking, how would your parents describe you when you were growing up?
Probably very rambunctious, brazen, outspoken. I think they raised me never to question my imagination, just to cherish it. I was very fortunate enough to be raised by two camp owners. My parents owned a day camp in Pomona, New York called Camp Ramacoy. And
Wow.
I had, 40, 50 acres as a backyard. And I was really blessed to have an art shack at my disposal. So looking back, I didn't realize that having pipe cleaners and lanyard and glue guns and pom-poms was, going to be called found objects for art installations. But I was really blessed to have that kind of liberty to create with these beautiful people that raised me with 1,000 other campers that they called.
So did you go every summer? Like when did you actually first go to the camp?
Oh, well, I was born, my dad is a camp owner. So I was like, I'm a camp owner's daughter by every, by the meaning in it itself. So,
yeah.
So I was, my camp owner's daughter. I was raised on a camp. We originally had a camp in the Catskills called Tunis Lake. And then my father bought a camp in Pomona, New York called Camp Ramacoy. And that's really rare. I mean, my parents broke color war, dressed up in costumes, jumping out of helicopters. I mean, they came rushing in on fire trucks. Yeah. I mean, when we finished dinner, our entire conversation would be how we're going to break, the Rama games this year. And so, snowing in August was very normal for me to see because they would create snow in August, my parents. So it was magical, mystical, spiritual. There was song and cheer, as everyone knows, in the dining hall, and people banged spoons and banged plates, and we sang and we celebrated as a community. So it's really no surprise looking back how I was raised. I'm comfortable walking out in my art shows adorned in spoons on my skirt or, sayings written all over my shirts. I mean, I was raised.
That's good. And it looks, it seems like they had a tremendous amount of creativity themselves with, some of the things that you mentioned. So by being there, obviously, as you said, a camper, camp owner's daughter, being around people, right, all the time, creativity. How do you feel it shaped you during your early years into, thoughts about like, what do I want to be when I grow up? Those questions that we ask ourselves.
Well, that's really a wonderful question. And I'm actually I feel very privileged to have the opportunity to answer that, quite honestly. Most people know that part of my childhood was growing up. My parents made sure that I was very close to my grandmother, Norma, who lived at 303 Beverly Road in Brooklyn. I still remember her phone number, GE51080. I mean, think about that. And
wow.
And she was a librarian, and she was a woman who really valued books and reading and cherished her community and her neighbors. And the story goes that on Friday nights after Shabbat, she would put the leftover challah bread aside, and my brother and I respectively would go up and down the elevator with her, collecting leftover bread from her neighbors from their Friday night dinner. With each piece of bread came a beautiful story of the week, whether it was someone's granddaughter who was getting engaged, a new job, a well wish for someone who was ill. So we collected this bread, but we collected stories. And I think those stories became the fabric of my life, including the beautiful campers that I would meet at my parents' camp. Each one individually had a beautiful story, and my parents were always invested in people. And then my grandmother in the morning would bake the bread, but she'd mix it the night before with butter, sugar, vanilla, cream, and she would take a spoon and she'd tell me at a very early age that a spoon extends your hand, your heart, and your soul. And when we stir the bread together, this bread is you have to be gentle and delicate, and the bread has this magical and mystical way of sharing their stories when they're in this collective pot. And she'd bake in the morning, and her neighbors would come calling at 12 o'clock the next day for their piece. So listen, that is incredible. Like, that's repurposing, that's using your imagination on a limited budget, that's sharing with community. And when the neighbors would come collect the bread, they were so grateful. So I think I learned at an early age that filling your apartment or your home with these beautiful smells of butter and aroma, and sharing food with others, extending your heart and soul, is a beautiful way to live. And that does marry a camp owner's, being a camp owner's daughter. They extended their camp was their home to so many. And cared about each person individually. And my parents also were very involved with helping children from underprivileged homes go to camp, scholarships, summer camp opportunity. My parents were very involved with. After 9/11, they helped a camp that helped children who had lost their families after Sandy Hook. So I was born like this,
Good. I love that. They sound wonderful, and grandmother sounds terrific.
And my grandma.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So, you have all this, nurturing, creativity going on around you. And, how did you get yourself at the beginning to think like writing's for me? I mean, I know I could tell you like telling stories. I could feel it. And, you're very passionate when you do discuss that. But how did writing, because speaking and writing are just so divergently different, right? Personally, for me, I'd rather be speaking than writing. So how'd you get into that?
So well said. So yes. So when my grandmother passed, it was really important to me. Well, I should actually go. Yeah. I mean, when my grandmother passed, I was about 24, and right before she was when she had actually announced to me that she had been diagnosed with lung cancer and she had only a limited time left. It was devastating for me. I couldn't imagine that I wouldn't feel her and smell her and taste her food and feel that comfort and love. And I begged her for her challah bread pudding recipe. And as it goes, she said, "There is no recipe. It's life. That's also challah. You'll figure it out." Wow, did she have belief in me? I really just wanted the recipe. So I was sort of upset with that. She did leave me her chopped chicken liver recipe, which is equally delicious, but so different. But when she passed, I locked myself in my bedroom and I just cried. It was just, the tears just couldn't stop. I just couldn't imagine not being with her. And my mother, who was a teacher, she taught social studies at Spring Valley High School, and a wonderful writer and a wonderful teacher in general. She handed me a blank journal and she said, write your feelings, dive into the story, dive into how you feel, have Grandma Nana with you and just write. And that was really the first time I really picked up a journal and a pen. I had been writing in college and obviously loved the written word, but never really dived into the idea of creating magical and mystical stories. And at that time, I created a fictitious character. Her name is Cindy. And Cindy sort of was the hero of all my stories. And I loved it. And then from that point on, I started taking makeshift writing classes in Scarsdale, where I was raising my kids at the time. And one of the teachers really pushed me to take this to another level, that my creative writing skills were one that she really admired, as did the classmates, and that I should enroll at NYU continuing education for screenwriting. I was 37, my kids were in middle school, high school, and I had the time. And coincidentally, at the same time that I was searching for something more, I was in my basement and I found my grandmother's spoons. And they were all beautiful. They were sort of stained, patinaed, cracked, blackened. But when you smelled them, I smelled her. And I was recalling and recounting the stories that she had told me and the beautiful people in her building, and the idea that I should not question my imagination. So I got in the car and I speeded to NYU and said, all right, let's cause a stir. I've got the spoons. I've got the stories. Let's see where we can go.
So, all right. So there you are. You're starting this new, basically, endeavor that's always been in you. And, how did the whole writing for, television, or like wanting to do unscripted and scripted, like, how did that evolve?
It is so,
because that's like sort of, if you want to go into something hard, that's almost the hardest thing I can actually, it's not like I want to do something more, but like, what's the hardest thing I could possibly do? And the most rejection I could possibly go through when I want to try to do something new. So how'd that happen?
This is so true, because I was just obviously, grappling with what the next chapter is for me. My children were, being raised, and I had opted out of the workforce, to raise them, and happily and generally, thrilled to have been at that time a stay-at-home mom, and I wanted more. And so yes, some people said sell real estate. Some people said, you have a gift for decor and cooking, why go into television where you have zero experience? And I think that's just part of my creative spirit. I'm just like, experience is life, life. And it was something I was craving and hungry for. I love telling stories, and I loved the idea of having my imagination seen in the movie or on television. So I just went for it. So I went to continuing education for screenwriting. My first teacher was Christopher Shin, and you had to bring a sample of your writing and read it out loud. And after class, he came over to me, and I was for sure he was going to say, "You're a snack mom. go home and continue like cooking that challah bread pudding." And he said, "You are incredibly talented." He really was incredibly generous. He said, "I see the weakness in your writing. I see that there's, a lack of conviction. You're going to have to really dive into this more, but we can't teach this. This is like, this is in you. And this is where, and I feel you. I feel each word jumping off the page." So, but he said, "I just always want you to understand that without conviction, your writing will lack a bit." And so I left there, and I was just completely inspired. I downloaded Final Draft. I started teaching myself how to write screenplays, and I just loved everything about what I was learning in these classes. And I created a show. At the time, unscripted programming reality shows were really hot, and I created a show called CEO of Household. Okay, so CEO of Household was going to take women who opted out of the workforce at the height of their earning potential to raise their kids, I love me, and they want back in, but the resumes look like a blank roll of toilet paper. That was before toilet paper was incredibly popular to collect. Anyway, and I just wholeheartedly believed that women could jump back in, even if they had, 10 to 20 years out of the workforce, because I saw these women, they were raising money for hospitals, pediatric cancer, their churches, their local food pantries. I mean, it was just endless what women could do. And if they just rolled that all up and applied for a job, I completely believe that they could rock, and I still believe they could rock a CEO position. And I had a dear friend in Scarsdale. His name's David Spiegelman. I need to give him a shout out. And he was at New Line Television at the time. And he's like, I love it. I love it. He's like, let's do it. And I pitched it to him literally at a gas station in Scarsdale in the middle of carpooling. And
Good.
he took it to his firm and they optioned it. And that was it. I ended up getting an agent at William Morris who loved it. And he also said he hopes that one day, if his wife came to somebody and said, I opted out, I want to opt back in, I need a shot, that they would do it for her. So I feel like what a good man, he did it for me. And from then on in, I was privy to all these amazing networks, Lifetime, TV Land, and all their network needs. And I was creating shows out of my imagination based on the network needs. And my agent would send these ideas or shows to various production companies, Tiger Aspect, Left Eye Productions, amazing people, Jason Hervey. I worked with Roker Productions. It was amazing. And it just, every time I wrote a show, I just had started really having more belief that women could opt back into the workforce regardless of, their
So
resume.
how many shows did you write for this series? And what you kept presenting them to the different
Right.
studios for a pilot? How did that go?
So great. So this is probably where I deserve to be on your film, like how failure becomes success. I probably wrote about 30 to 40 original unscripted programming shows, and I would constantly my agent would constantly call me and said, the network passed and it's not for them. They would have done this, and one thing I never did was I never said why. It was a constant collaboration with celebrities. I worked with Michael Strahan. I worked with the Lohan family. I worked at one time with Larry King. I mean, it was, Andre Lontali. I wrote a show for him that we pitched to Bravo. I mean, it was just timing, and I was okay with it not getting picked up because I was being picked up. I was airing. I was in the room. I was pitching. I was at the networks. I was at the production companies. I was having meetings, and I was gaining confidence and security that I could do this. So even though the shows never aired, I never questioned why. So we kept working
Plus,
together.
I mean, just to interrupt for a second, I mean, yeah. That's an exact definition. People always say it's the journey that makes us happy. I mean, even once I finish a deal, it was all the stuff to get up to the point to where that deal actually happened. It was all the people I met, excuse me, and the trials, tribulations, like where I thought it wasn't going to be there, then it was there. And then finally it happens and you're excited, but the journey, which is what you're saying, you went through many times, and the not asking why is a very interesting way.
I never asked why. And I think that's why they never let me go. It was, I never asked why, because I didn't have time for why too. I was catching up and catching into a world that I knew was very difficult to be in. So I didn't have time for the why. I had to just come up with another show and another idea. And most people who know me know that that's really how I roll. It's like, okay, we're just going to keep going here. I was so lucky to work with Barry Diller's company at one time, just pitching shows to them. I mean, they didn't air, but like to just be at IAC. I mean, it was so cool. I mean, so everything to me was spiritually a magnificent journey. And I was showing my two daughters at the time that you have the ability to create the life for yourself, and to put aside naysayers and people who say, give up, it's how much longer you're going to keep at this. I mean, it's your story to tell. It's your story to live. And I did want to show my daughters that their mother did opt out of the workforce and now is opting back in. And she wasn't going to give up. So I swore that I would have a show on the air by the time I was 50. And on my 49th birthday, December 2nd, my first show aired on TLC called Suddenly Single. And I was so happy.
Good for you. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. I spent 2 years interviewing hundreds of suddenly single women in New York who were navigating their newfound freedom. I wanted to do a show similar to The Housewives, but have it where there's a commonality that each woman can share a story as opposed to being so fractured. And everyone loved it. I mean, I worked with Pink Sneakers Productions to produce it, and a lot of the networks just all went crazy for it. So we were out looking for different cast members. I don't know if you remember, there were flip phones, like these little things, these little like phones that you could have videos on, and I would send them out to the production company, which was in Florida at the time. And I would just keep interviewing women and interviewing them and interviewing them. And I was learning so much about women and their newfound freedom in New York and what it was like to restart their lives and jump in. And it was just magical. And so that show aired on TLC, and it was a pilot. Okay, it didn't get picked up, but let's go there.
How many shows aired? How many shows aired?
No, just one. It was a pilot.
Just one. Okay, just one for a
and
pilot.
It was very well received, but I was in competition with another show they were airing at the same time, and they won. The other show had more viewers, but I was very proud of what we did. And obviously it was sort of, I was able to feel satisfaction from what I saw, what I created, what I believed in, and what I manifested.
Just think, I mean, if you would have said, I wish I would have had that show on at 45, maybe it would have happened. You picked 50, you could have picked 45, but it just shows, we have a lot to do with how we believe and think. And, here you go, you finally got it. And listen, that's an unbelievable accomplishment. I mean, you start something at 37, not knowing what you're doing, never give up, meet all these amazing people, network yourself into a place that you did completely through just, you being you, and you actually had a milestone. So it doesn't get picked up.
Right.
You're going to turn 50. So what drove you into your next thing? What's next?
In Patti form, or we could also say, my character Cindy, who sort of writes me out of all my messes. I say to myself, all right, this is all good. I have about 3,000 pages of dialogue that these women that I had met during the interview process, the casting process of Suddenly Single. I'm going to turn this beautiful Bible of words into a scripted series. But of course I am. I have never written a scripted series before, but I'm going to. So I was fortunate enough during all my time in the unscripted arena that I've met so many people in television, and I pitched the idea to a renowned production company in LA that had many shows on the air, and they loved it. They absolutely thought it was a great premise to have a woman who has just moved to New York out of the suburbs after 25 years of being married, and is finding her newfound freedom in New York, and all the trials, tribulations, fear, joy, elations that she experiences was the premise of the show. So I flew to LA. They again loved the script, but saw that there was little loops in there that weren't perfectly polished, that I wasn't a seasoned television writer, and they want to partner me with one of their renowned writers, which honored at hello. So we meet at the Peninsula again. I can't believe this is true. And I partner with a beautiful, talented writer. And for 4 years, we collaborate and create this pilot. And after 4 years, yeah, that's how long it takes. We obviously are now ready. I wouldn't say obviously, we are now ready to take it to the network. So there's pitch meetings with HBO, Showtime, ABC, NBC, CBS. I'm flying to LA to go to all the networks and pitch this show. And I was, again, this is part of the story because the show didn't get picked up. But the experience was absolutely mind-boggling, and I learned so much. So when the show didn't get picked up, obviously I was upset, but I wasn't torn down. I was like, you know what? We're going to turn this into a feature film. But of course you are. So I take the option back. Actually, I don't want to say I took the option back. I think they threw it at me. So
Right.
but I caught it, and I rewrote it into a film. I have a very close friend who's a very well-regarded literary agent in LA, and I sent it to him, and I've shared this story many, many times. And I'm in a reading of my script. I've allocated different parts to different actors in the room that I've hired for the day so I could hear my script out loud. And it's absolutely unbelievable. But as we're in the middle of reading, I get an email from this gentleman that he's read my script. And I'm so excited. I'm going to now read this email out loud to everyone before I've read it. Well, maybe I should have read it first. So he couldn't get through the first 10 pages. He understood the story, he believed in the story, but he again went back to sort of what Christopher Shin said, you've got to believe it. And I don't see that part of it. So I dismissed everyone from my living room, and I said, game on. Cindy, my main character, I wasn't deleting her. I loved her. I believed in her. I believed in her story, but the story needed to be told. So I decided that I would use my screenplay as my personal playbook and take the words off the page and create them in real life. And the story was based on a woman who inherently knew her husband was leaving her the day their youngest daughter went to college, and recreated her life through spoons. And so I don't want to go to the whole thing because we don't have much time, but I literally, here's my spoon. I picked up my spoon. I picked up my spoon and I started stirring. I remembered all the stories that my grandmother had told me, the days at camp, my parents jumping out of helicopters. There was just no way we were going to be taken down. But the problem really was that I was writing a story I was afraid to live. She was the hero of the story. She created this beautiful life in the art world with her spoons, that the drips told stories of fears, trepidation, joy, liberation, love. And I hadn't really lived it. I was writing about it. So we started, and I actually opened up the screenplay and I reenacted the first scene, and I started creating art with my spoons. And it has been an incredible experience. I could not.
So you became your own show in real life, which I absolutely love. It's like unbelievable for like, because you're taking everything that you did as a learning, a movement forward, a lesson, and you were so passionate about it. Instead of quitting, right? I mean, like the rejection you did get was a lot. You turned it into something that now is all over the place. So I mean, at the beginning I said, you're in these galleries. So where is this art now? And how, so how long's the art been going? When did this actually happen?
This is so much fun, actually, to tell the story in the sequence. So thank you again. This is such a privilege. So that happened about 8 years ago, where I decided to become the artist that I had written about. But again, art was always in my world. I mean, going back, I've written about this. When my grandmother would pass out the challah bread pudding, Edith, her neighbor, on Sundays, we come up with easels and canvases and paintbrushes and sort of barter for the bread she taught.
I get that, but
okay.
like,
okay.
No, I'm okay, no, in a good way. Like I paint on
Oh,
Sundays. That doesn't mean I'm in galleries because I feel, like, so how did that happen? Like how did you,
okay.
because
So
that's
you're
an
right.
interesting,
You're
yeah.
right. So basically, after I, created the art that I saw on my page, the next step was to go to a gallery, right? And that was in the script. Cindy goes to a gallery, so Patti has to go to a gallery. I
Exactly.
think that was page like 30. And I meet the most lovely woman. Her name's Bonnie. She owns Chase Edwards Gallery in Bridgehampton. And I show her my artwork. I tell her the story, the backstory. And by the way, this is no different than walking into a network and pitching a reality show, because you're talking to someone who doesn't know you, probably hasn't read the script, and probably wants you out of there in 36 seconds, you know.
Yeah.
So I guess these are part of the learning tools, and that I had mastered. So I walked in, told her the story, and she loved it. And she said, all right, I'm going to give you a show. I'm going to give you a one night show. And she also helped me, came back to my gallery, my studio, I should say, and explained to me which one she loved, which one she didn't, that I should photograph them, blow them up on archival paper, print them on plexi, aluminum back. I mean, she taught me. I mean, I also am very open to learning. And I'm very honest about telling people I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm very open to having you teach me if you're willing to. And I think that that's also a very good skill. I never pretend to know something that I don't know. And she helped me, and we created a show together called Cause a Stir. And a portion of the proceeds were going to City Harvest. I actually had called them and told them about this new endeavor that I was embarking on, painting and sculpting and writing stories about spoons, that spoons are the most beautiful and humble tool that are used around the globe to feed ourselves and to feed others in one humble motion, the very essence of love, the best part about humanity. And I cannot profit from a spoon without giving back to those spoons that are unfilled. So that was
That's great. I love that.
amazing. And they were thrilled. And it started from there. And then the passion really not only became about the art, but about the deliverance, about the stories, about the spoons that were so beautiful and people wanted to hear them. And then I was able to use my art to as an example of family, community, humanity, and so then respectively, I've been in other galleries in New York, one in London. Wolf Gallery was kind enough to take one of my pieces a few years ago. And then, of course, the success that I really feel, one of my biggest successes was Bloomingdale's. Bloomingdale's had seen some few posts that I had put on Instagram, and through a friend who had showed them, and they were launching their new denim floor. And they handed me a pair of jeans and said, here, go curate some art on here. You're one of 7 artists. We're going to launch 7 pairs of jeans when we launch the new denim, and do your thing. So I'm like, okay, but Cindy never did this.
You had to be yourself now, like Patti.
Yeah, so Patti, I had to rely on Patti.
Right.
So I took the pair of jeans and I wrote spoon, feed, love, accept one another, embroidered on the back. I embellished them with spoons and cherries and leaves. And I just created this sort of resilient fabric, which we all are. And to represent mother, nature and nurture working as one. And it was really a beautiful display of my story of love, of life, of family, community, feeding. So they displayed it the day that the denim exhibit was presented, and I came in my own pair of jeans. So the jeans that I made for the exhibit, I actually made another pair for me. Again, the camper in me. And one of the Bloomingdale's executives came over to me and said, hey, Spoon Lady. So that's how I sort of got the name Spoon Lady. And they said, we are going to be launching our cosmetic floor in a month, and we'd love you to consider you as one of the artists to be given a few bottles to curate with your story. I I was like, that's impossible.
I love that. It's terrific.
So I made it, I was really petrified to do that, but I got outsized perfume bottles, 10 feet, 8 feet, 6 feet, Hermes, Jo Malone, Tiffany, and I didn't have a studio in New York, which doesn't, scare me. So I did tell Bloomingdale's, the executives, that I don't have a studio for these big forms to be sent. Now what? So they gave me their conference room on the 8th floor in Bloomingdale's, where all the executives in window design and displays and corporate work. So I literally have these huge perfume bottles on the 8th floor in Bloomingdale's, surrounded by the most celebrated and artistic and brilliant people. In the day that those bottles went on the floor between Chloe and Chanel on 59th Street off Lex entrance, I cried.
There you go.
I
did it.
Absolutely wept.
You turned Cindy into Patti in an unbelievable way. It's
We
terrific.
merged.
I'm thinking back to this whole story now, and I'm like getting lots of different cool lessons from it. But when your grandmother did not give you the recipe, it's almost as if she knew there is no recipe except moving forward in what you feel you can create and do, and go find it. And if she gave it to you, then it just would, maybe you wouldn't feel what you felt today, or have that same ambition that it took you to bust through each time and, not give up, and now end up to be doing still something very creative, but from turning Cindy into Patti. And I love it. A question I have for you is like, and I think I might know the answer, but like, who do you think was your best mentor in your life, and why?
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, obviously I would say my Nana. I mean, partially when she died, I never had the opportunity to say goodbye. And that had bothered me for so many years. I just wanted to say, I love you and thank you. And I honestly do believe that part of my work, that her spirit lives inside me, and that everything I'm doing, given the opportunity, she would have done, to create art and make sure that the art helps feed other people and oneself, to be an example for women who want to create a life outside their home at any age, that it's possible. So her soul pushes me. And
I love it.
And what happened most recently is when City Harvest opened their new facility in Brooklyn, which is not far from my grandmother's apartment. I was one of 7 artists asked to have an installation there. So I have a huge piece of my playtime print there. I think it's 27 feet long. It's just really
wow.
And it's about love and nurturing and playfulness and kindness and celebrating all that's good. So I'm so grateful to be there. But I did ask them if they would consider, I pitched it, I guess, the poem that I wrote that was based on my grandmother's teachings, because if that poem was in their facility in Brooklyn, her legacy would live on forever.
That's terrific.
It wasn't my story to tell. Yep. It was hers. So if you don't mind, can I tell you the poem?
Yeah, I mean, as far as what, recite the poem?
Yeah, just recite it in honor of her.
Sure, yeah.
So it's just because it's there, and it rings truth now that it's Thanksgiving, and it's a time that we need to think of others and communities. So it says, we feed our children feed themselves, our children feed their children. Together we feed our family feeds us. Together we feed our community feeds us. To give is to receive is to give. Nature and nurture are one. Life is a circle of spoons. And that's
wow. What a way to end a podcast, with like a ridiculously beautiful poem. I don't even know if the podcast is worthy of such a beautiful poem, but that's terrific. And your story is amazing. So where can is there anything people can go visit today? Is that one in Brooklyn still up? So
certainly it's wonderful to go to the City Harvest facility.
Good. So people can do work. And anything else? Where can people find you on Instagram?
So Instagram, it's at Patti Grabel. I have a website, patti-grabel.com. where you could see my work and read some of my stories. And I'm about to launch next month, which I'm excited about, so stay tuned, a necklace that reads, "I am my answer." And it's going partial of the proceeds are going to help women around the globe who are trying to start their businesses. So I'm
Love
really
that.
excited about that. So there's so much there, and I'm grateful to have the gifts that I have learned at such a young age.
Well, thanks so much for being on. What an uplifting podcast. I enjoyed it. Terrific. I mean, immensely. And again, I can't appreciate, I appreciate you coming on.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much.